Thank you, everybody, for joining NFT, Gaming, and Metaverse. What's your next move? So we have an all-star panel that doesn't need introductions, but as a formality, we'll introduce everyone. My name is Hervé Loren. Robbie?
Hi, I'm Robbie Young. I'm the CEO of Animoca Brands. We make games, and we're also a very active investor across the Web3 ecosystem.
Hi, my name is Yves Larose, and I'm the CEO and founder of the EOS Network Foundation, Gen 3 Layer 1 blockchain.
Hi, my name is Sukjit Chang. I'm from Kokone. I'm now CEO of the Kokone Europe.
Hi, I'm Betty Dubney. I'm the COO of the ICOS, which is a AAA MMORPG game with blockchain and metaverse integrations layered on top.
Hi everyone, I'm Sebastien Borget, COO and co-founder at the Sandbox, as well as the president of the Blockchain Game Alliance.
Perfect, thank you. Welcome, everybody. So let's start first, maybe with you, Yves. EOS Networks, name that we have known since 2017, one of the biggest ICOs, 4.5 billion back in the days. Can you give us a little bit of an update about EOS, where you guys are at, and the link between EOS and the metaverse?
Sure. So, yeah, EOS, everybody knows EOS because of the $4.1 billion ICO. What people don't know is that that did not go to developers, it did not go to the community, it essentially went to a private entity that the network essentially fired a year and a half ago. And it introduced new accountability measures to ensure that this never reproduces again. EOS essentially exemplifies what Web3 was built to do. It's basically token holders, community members, taking the power back against corporate greed. EOS essentially is or arguably is one of the largest, if not the largest, DAOs in this space or in the world. So EOS, obviously, because of that ACO, got a lot of fanfare. But you know, fast forwarding a couple of years, the ENF was formed. I formed this a year and a half ago, rallying the community, reaching consensus to basically take faith in our own hands. And we, alongside the others that were leveraging the software, the underlying software, which we renamed to Antelope, formed a coalition. We formed a coalition with Telos, UX, and Wax, other chains that were using the underlying software. We rebranded, we took ownership of the code, ownership of the IP, and we started deploying significant amounts of capital into the space because the space was starved of capital, essentially. So the underlying tech was incredibly strong, but there was no marketing, no partnerships, no, basically all of the other things that make an ecosystem come to life. And a big part of that was funding. And so once the coalition was formed, we started deploying heavy capital in certain things, for example, like IBC, so inter-blockchain communication, which we just launched a month or so ago, which is quite key to the metaverse, and I think we'll touch upon that a little bit later. We're releasing in fall this year instant finality, which will, alongside inter-blockchain communication, really elevate that technology. So instant finality basically is just reducing that time to lib down to between 2 to 4 seconds so that you can take one chain, parallelize it across horizontally, and essentially have unlimited scalability. We're also releasing our EVM, our latest version of EVM, on April 14th. So last year, EOS deployed roughly $40 million back into the ecosystem, into the hands of community members, developers, various initiatives. We just announced a $100 million fund back in the fall, VC fund for the for-profit side of things. And just 4 days ago, I announced that 20 million of that 100 million will be dedicated towards EVM and GameFi, so very relevant for the rest of this talk. So essentially, EOS is open for business.
Very good. Thanks for the update. Sebastien, NFT in gaming, where are we at the moment? Obviously, Sandbox is in the heart of it all. Have you seen difference in terms of whether NFTs are being used, changes of revenue models? What is the market like at the moment?
So as the president of the Blockchain Game Alliance, we see more than 500 members that are evolving in the space. There's the consensus that we're still quite early on in the space. Many game studio wants to experiment with these technologies and see how they can apply in gaming. And like we see that all of them, they agree on this idea that we need more content and more fun to retain the users that have been attracted to the space initially. And that also translates already in quite fast, actually, like within a matter of a year or two, in a change of the pattern of how developers and game creators have been using NFTs and tokens in their gameplay. Think back maybe 2 years ago, like Axie Infinity and then guilds have been mostly leading the play to earn or play and earn pattern, which is essentially incentivizing players to earn rewards and through owning NFTs that they use or they give to guilds to essentially use on their behalf to collect those resources and farms in game. But there was a flaw essentially in that design, like essentially it was a zero-sum game. The tokens were coming only from the game itself and very few revenue from the outside to keep a healthy loop. This year, I think like we're already seeing a big change on that pattern, essentially led by games like The Other Side by Yuga Labs and something that we've been implementing in Sandbox for quite a while as well, the concept of season and engagement with leaderboard, where owning an NFT essentially give you another NFT, so rewarding holders first. That new NFT is somehow the key or the gateway toward a gameplay. And in that gameplay, people will compete to climb in a leaderboard, reach the higher score, and only the top winner, or maybe the only winner, number one at the top, gets a very rare, very scarce resource or reward that can hence probably be very valuable for the community. And that, I think, is going to emerge, that plus storytelling, combining the two, revealing game and progressively and making people engage, will emerge as potentially interesting new model that the industry will follow. Because once one game is successful, it's going to train the users and the other developer to apply that model, to replicate it, to iterate, and so on. At the end of the day, it's all a story of like iteration, and optimization of a gameplay. We've seen that before in Web 2 and a mobile free-to-play game, like top grossing game weren't born with those freemium gacha mechanics, starter packs, and other. It's because thousands of developers applied it and iterated it through soft launch and testing. It's quite interesting to witness, and it's interesting that we're seeing a growing audience overall, like showing that we're maybe not too far from something that people can call an adoption or a mass adoption.
Betty, in terms of business model for what you guys are developing, what do you find interesting within the NFT space?
That it's limitless and that it's such an infantile technology that we really can go anywhere with it. I think that for us specifically, we're really looking about utility and how can we offer utility, but because our game actually targets traditional gamers and we're layering blockchain on top of that, we're trying to build bridges to a community that's become a little bit suspicious of NFTs and reintroduce them to why this technology can marry so well with gaming and why it can expand what's possible with gaming and provide ownership in a way that gamers are actually already used to. You know, trading items back and forth, that's happened forever in games. It's just usually happening kind of on a black market back-end deal because the game hasn't promoted that. The game isn't built around that. And we want to introduce that. And we also believe that the true metaverse is these games working together. So, you know, this brings up the topic that we all know, which is interoperability, and how do these assets move between different games, and how do we build that metaverse as a team, as an industry, to create something really special for users that I think all industries will then ultimately build on top of, right? As this idea that a metaverse could be the next version of the internet. And it starts, from my perspective, with gaming and NFTs.
So for people who are less familiar with your company, can you give the audience a little bit of data about how big you guys are and what are you guys focusing on at the moment?
Me? Yeah. Okay, hi. I thought you were talking to the Batty. Okay, the Kokone, we are quite mature studio. People call game studio, but we are a digital fashion house. Been 15 years, mainly in Japan, and then Korea, Taiwan, somewhere there. And then we've been digging into only one specific field, which is avatar styling and social networking services for last 15 years. It's quite long. Even before we're talking about, there's no wording like NFT or Web3, Metaverse kind of things. So basically, you can even imagine now that we've done this for quite a long time, but actually it's a Web2 mobile app. But the full concept that we have currently we have 16 services in live, and then it's about the Web3 concept, because our avatars, they buy fashion items, beauty items, wear it, show off, and they trading in the we call flea markets in our services. So basically, it's not a cryptocurrency, it's not a Web3 marketplace, but we do have a Web2-based market and digital currency in each different services. So that's what we have been done, and we keep doing it. So, of course, as a mature company, that we are considering combining Web3, but maybe what we are seeing could be slightly different than other metaverse or NFT companies have done these days, because that we seize the NFT for our customer, like giving you idea, like we have 130 million accumulated users so far, not global, only in the Japan and Korea, Taiwan, those area. But we are trying to use NFT for more fun, not for more money. More fun is the first priority for us. Why? Because that all those fashion items that we have sold so far, 16 billion pieces of clothing virtually. That means the 130 million people, they do have 16 billion pieces in their closet. So that's a lot. But as one studio providing this many of the clothing, it's not that easy. We have about 500 designers, and then they are producing about 4,700 pieces of the virtual clothing every month. So actually, the NFT is giving us a lot more variety, because the metaverse, we are connecting with our old Web2 mobile apps. This metaverse is not a metaverse like Endless Land. It's a metaverse, it's actually a department store that we are building in now. So those new items, new fashion item as an NFT, not only my company, our company does, all other studios, they can actually start to sell into our department store. And all single people, they can actually do that. UGC can be happening in that metaverse. So that's why the users in Coconuts Web2 world, they will have a lot more varieties and they can have more fun. That's the whole point that what we are, creating now. So it's a slightly different perspective that we have. Yes.
Robbie, Animoca brands have been very vocal, spearheading the efforts regarding NFT royalties. Can you give the audience a little bit of a recap about where we are, where's the vision, and how do we build this on a healthy way?
Sure. I think this stems actually from what Betty was just talking about in terms of the challenges of interoperability. I think when we think about what are the benefits that Web3 can offer game developers and designers specifically over how they've been making games historically, interoperability, I think, is always first and foremost in their mind, this idea that we can take items from one game and move them into another game seamlessly back and forth. I mean, it's kind of a dream from a player's perspective, and I think it's only possible if we think that there must be some kind of incentive to share between games. Because historically, if we both have two different games and my players go into his game, I'm like, hey, you just stole my players, right? That's my source of revenue. I don't want to share my players because my game design is built around putting a walled garden around my players. So as long as we have some way to share the benefit of that player activity, it allows us to be open. And so this is really important. We cannot have these network effects unless we have creator royalties, so that when my content goes into his environment and stays there, my content becomes more valuable and maybe I can benefit from future royalties because he added utility to my content. And so ensuring those creator royalties exist is really important. We've put online a framework, a legal framework that we think, it's an open source concept under Creative Commons that the industry hopefully can benefit from. And we hope that we can come up with this sort of structure by which creators can use legal contracts so that when people purchase content, they agree in the action of purchasing that content to honor creator royalties. I think enforcement is a separate issue because it's actually a complex process. So I think first we have to establish the right to royalties, and then we establish the enforcement mechanisms. So it's a sort of a two-part process.
And you mentioned interoperability. Where are we at the moment with this concept? How feasible, credible is this a vision? From where you're sitting, seeing with the 400 portfolio companies that you guys are working with, how do you make that concept go to life?
Sure. I think I'll just be very quick about this, and then actually I want to pass it to Sebastien, because I think from an interoperability standpoint, it's very difficult. We have actually helped, together with Sandbox and many other firms in the space, to create something called the Open Metaverse Alliance, which is a non-profit consortium where we just talk about these issues because we think it's important as a community to get together in an open forum to build open source solutions to interoperability. But in terms of the companies in our portfolio, I actually wanted to pass it to Sebastien because I think what they've done with the Sandbox in the last season is probably one of the more mature examples in the space of how to deliver, early stage interoperability.
Yeah, happy of course to share some insight. Like first, it shouldn't be a concept. Like anything we talk, we want people to feel concretely what it means. That's the only way we can drive people to embrace and use. And so, we've seen, specifically in the metaverse, avatar as your digital identity, this character that you control, the one that you use to explore and go on quests, etc. And we saw a lot of people were actually buying NFTs back in 2021 just to put them as their 2D profile picture over social media, like Twitter and Facebook and so on. And we saw well, they use it as their identity. Why cannot they use it in Metaverse? What do we need to do to achieve that? And so all of them being NFTs, we could read the metadata on chain, their attributes, their traits. We developed algorithm to generate 3D model based on the voxel samples that we have at Sandbox. And today we support more than 45 of the blue chip NFT collection from Bored Ape, World of Women, Clonex, Cool Cats, etc. that became 3D character. You just connect your wallet. You don't mint any new token. It's really seamless, and you can use those as your identity to play ton of games and experiences that are available. So somehow all the owners of those NFT get a lot of benefits into other applications. Directly, they can connect, they can socialize, they can build, they can be creative, they can earn reward as they complete quests in those experiences. That is what we want to show as concrete use case of interoperability.
And what are the steps for a company or an individual to be part of that Open Metaverse Alliance? What are is it a club? How do you get that going and get the industry behind it?
I'll leave it back to Robbie.
Oh, I was going to say, just go to the website, oma3.org, and you can literally just sign up as a creator member and then come and participate. We have Slack channels and forums. We have, actually on the website, it's very simple. It's 4 pages of brochureware, so it won't take you long. But we have essentially several different working group topics related to interoperability, like mapping and portaling and this kind of stuff. And just come in and volunteer and share your thoughts and ideas. It's a completely open forum. I mean, that's the intention. It's supposed to be community-led standards because the last thing we want is for some, super large company to say, look, these are the standards and everybody must obey these standards. We think it's very important that we as a community build these ideas from the ground up.
Yves, how do you convince metaverse companies to build on EOS versus any other layer 1 platforms out there?
That's a really good question. I think we're seeing a shift in the industry right now where a couple of years ago, and even arguably last year as well, the amount of NFTs or the amount of assets in-game that were being minted are somewhat limited. And this space right now is still very nascent. So when we're talking about how many players, how many daily active users, it's very, very small. So the networks currently can still handle that capacity in general. So whether you're EVM based or you're running your own chain or whatnot, the capacity is not so much of an issue. But what we're seeing is that a lot of these NFTs right now are very highly valued NFTs. So if you've got a $1,000 in-game sword or something like that, you're good with a $2 transfer, whatever. But when we look at Web 2, the majority of digital assets, for example, you just mentioned 16 billion assets, the majority of those assets will be penny assets. They'll be 5 cents, 10 cents. Look at Steam Store, that type of thing. So if you want to actually have to scale, or if you want to be able to scale to meet the demand of what eventually, like Sebastien said, is kind of mainstream adoption, you're going to need to back that up with the tech to be able to, one, be interoperable, because you need to be able to communicate with everybody else, because as you mentioned, the players will want to move around and they want to have real ownership of that asset. But also within a particular network, you're going to need to be able to scale to handle that demand. So it needs to be highly scalable, but also negligible cost. So you need to have a system that can accommodate a lot of players with essentially no fees. And that's one of the value adds from EOS. So just a few years back, and we've greatly improved since then, but we were running more than 100 million transactions per day, daily. To put that in perspective, in one single day, we were doing more transactions than Bitcoin and Ethereum for the entire year. Still today, Wax, which runs on Antelope, which is a software that we build, they do roughly 20, 25 million transactions per day. And so in order to be able to accommodate that demand, or if Kokone were to come in or something like that, you're going to need to be able to scale. And that's one of our huge value propositions, is we've solved a lot of those technical issues. That's where EOS spent a lot of its early years focusing. And now we're trying to solve the other side of things, which is the marketing, the branding, the partnerships, et cetera.
So actually, you've been around for 15 years within the space. When you look at Web3, when you look at where to build, what layer one to choose, kind of that transition, how do you approach it from your perspective?
First of all, Eve says like come to EOS. Yeah, we are getting many calls from the different layer one, layer zero, and then for our point of view, in that sense, we are trying to be very careful. At the end of the day, eventually it will be multi-channel no matter what. But the first start is always very important. So currently we are being very careful to see that. But the interoperability that we were just talking about, but in Kokone, we do see that it's an interoperability, but at the same time we call it as inter-exchangeability, because that first issue that we have, we're already running 16 different services. So first that each one of those services will be connected with our Metaverse department store. That means we always got to think about the Web 2 and Web 3. It's coexisting. It's not only Web 3 we're talking. It's got to be coexisting. So it has to be really smooth to go in and out. So the user always starting from the Web 2, they're going into the Metaverse, it's Web 3 based, and then they shop and have fun, have coffee with other avatars, and then come back to their home, which is their mobile app. So that's one. Second is that we have 16 different services, meaning to us, like in a digital fashion house, means it's like 16 different brands that we have, because each one of those services has a very different word. Some are very universal style, some are Cinderella style, so it's quite a different brand. So when I go to the Metaverse department store, now I can see not only my style of the clothing, but also Cinderella clothing is there that I may want to get it. Then how do we want to make this new design on my avatar, on my body, and then I can bring it back to my Web 2. Then my Web 2, the mobile, the friends, avatar friends, they will be shocked. Oh, where did you get this total new design? That's the kind of fun that we wanted to put it in. So giving you a bit of the secret that we've been working for already many years, that actually our designers are internally we use, that we've been developing AI. The first reason we did it is because that we have about 1,100 employees, but out of them, 500 are designers. So we don't want to exceed too many. So we starting to develop our AI, which is based on the 15 years of the data that we sold. So designers are using it, and they are saving a lot of time. But from that invention that we are starting to develop this AI as a sort of magic box that we can exchange the other fashion onto my body kind of thing. So I think combining Web 2 and Web 3 and then the different NFT on to the another body or another avatars and stuff, those are the quite an interesting topic. Probably we all need to find it out together, you know. But I just said Kokone is doing one of the way as we're using the AI for doing so. Yeah.
Betty, from your perspective and the concept of interoperability, how do you guys approach it?
Our team is kind of right now focused on what we're calling bespoke interoperability as a service. So what we envision this is at this stage, at some point, somebody is going to have to sit down and say, okay, this is the asset. What does it mean in our game? And that does potentially involve bespoke coding to create something that honors the fidelity of the game in terms of looks, style, aesthetics, color, all of that kind of stuff. What engine are you building on? Like, these are really, really important things that will mean that that asset belongs in the game and works in the game. So our team, and we're still in early stages of our development, but our team is really looking about how do we intake that? What's the process going to be for us? That means that when we have partners who want to bring their collections into our game or want to have their assets have utility in our game, how do we achieve that? What's the pipeline to make that happen? How do we make it affordable and still kind of honor AAA graphics and also the world, because we're building kind of a very futuristic take on Greek mythology. So if you come from a racing game, what does your race car look like in our world? Is it actually a mount? Is it something different? Do we have cars like that? Does it become a ship? What does it look like? How are the stats honored? And these are really, really important questions that have to be answered as a community, because and I think it's already been said here, but it's certainly been discussed a lot this week. What's the standard? And how do we kind of create an industry-based standard that's defined by our community, that we all kind of play by those rules to start streamlining that process? Because that's when we're going to be able to achieve this as a team, being in the community, and actually make it possible for these games to have that interoperability.
Sebastien, one of the questions that comes often from user is the onboarding process. How do we actually make onboarding seamless in the gaming, in the Web3 gaming? What are some of the best practices out there, whether it's wallets, whether it's different ways to either onboard the Web2 community, either onboard just crypto native users?
Right. There's a few simple principles here that I think can already convince someone to want to go and spend time on your product or service. First one is make it appealing, make them want to actually go through that effort. It might sound simple, but some games, or more specifically, are not that good to explaining why would they go through that effort, what can they get for it, what sort of experience. You just put the artwork content that doesn't really describe. So that's the first step. I guess don't force the login at the Connect wallet as the very first onboarding step as well. Let people try a little bit your gameplay in a way before you go to the step where they need a wallet. Typically, if they don't need to own an asset to start playing, why do you force that? You should really push back the moment later on. Offer different options for connection. I think you should encompass option for like email sign up with, I don't know, Bitski, for example, or Venly, or Magic Link, or etc. Option where you can connect with a social login, typically, to facilitate onboarding, and keep more option for wallet base now. Like some people still use MetaMask, which has improved a lot in UX. Some are keen now to use Wallet Connect because they have a mobile wallet most of the time and they want to keep connecting, and open to like new standards based on various regions. Like Coinbase is probably more popular in the US, but if you look at Korea, maybe a Kakao wallet, Clayton, things like that are more spread around. I believe that as a game developer, you unfortunately don't have the time and resource to try to solve all things on your own. So you also have to rely on like the capacity of the ecosystem that you chose to develop, and hence the choice of the chain that you chose, to come up with great product, great UX, and great solution to your own problems. You can spend most of your time and energy focusing on what you should be doing, right? A great game, a great experience, something that like is core to your mission. So that's why as well, like choosing a chain that has like great marketplace and liquidity for the discovery and acquisition of users, that have one or multiple wallet solution and a user base that's already pretty well installed, is usually a greater way to make your job easier at doing things right and not reinventing the wheel all the time, which might be great, but becomes increasingly harder as like the number of projects come and the barrier to entry scales, because the expectation from the users are higher. Like we're no longer in the day where doing a CryptoKitties clone is enough. Like people have moved beyond that. And it's normal, and we've seen that before. We've seen that in mobile free-to-play. The very first iPhone game were so simple at the beginning, and now they are like very complex, multi-million-dollar, if not hundreds of millions of dollar production. And yet, it also evolved thanks to the platform underlying. Like when you think about how Apple or Google Play have improved the way people can purchase. Like there wasn't, at the beginning I remember it was very hard to make an in-app purchase. Like you had to wait the pop-up, input the credit card on the small screen and so on. And then came Touch ID, so just with a finger, much faster. And then came Face ID, just look while you play. And it became so fast that like you didn't even have to look, it almost instant. All of that will come in Web3, I'm sure. Like so it's a matter of like basically like choosing the right chain, the right partner, building great UX, and not trying to reinvent all by yourself.
Robbie, from where you're sitting, you see every deal, NFT, gaming, Web3 deal that in the industry. What do you feel is the most exciting right now? What are the projects that you look at and you're like, hey, I think this is going to be the future, that we're going to back it, we're going to back those projects? Are there specific things that you're really looking for while you analyze, business models and roadmaps?
I think, if anything, if I were to boil it down, one of the other trends that people have been talking a lot about, I guess, feels like for almost a year, is this idea of Web 2.5. It's the kind of, we're trying to figure out what is the middle ground, because maybe our customers are coming from Web 2 and they're not ready for Web 3. And my colleague Yat always likes to push back on this, because he's like, well, is it more Web 2.4 or Web 2.6? You got to choose. Right, and I see his point, because I think that it's our job with Web3 applications to show what are the benefits of making that transition and that migration, because we have to encourage our colleagues from the industry to do the same. But I do think there are some interesting learnings. I see a lot of projects out there right now thinking about economy design. It's something where we ourselves have scaled up a lot of internal resources in, because true Web3 economy design is extremely complex, and I would not say for a minute that we have solved it, but we have definitely experimented, probably more than most, so we have a lot of experience there. But it just continues to layer complexity, and so you need to completely rethink how you design game economies. And so I've seen a lot of examples of things like running dual economies. That seems to be a very popular pitch at the moment, where people are thinking about how can I do a traditional free-to-play model and actually have a secondary economy where there's ownership, but the ownership is more around cosmetics and less about things that have power in the game and change the gameplay. And that gives comfort, I think, to a lot of traditional game developers because it allows them to balance the game in a way that they're familiar with. So I think we're seeing lots of different approaches at solving this, but the most important thing I look for is innovation. And I think that it can come in many different kinds of forms, whether it's in games or ed tech or DeFi. You look for people who are thinking about new ways to solve these problems, because the beauty of being in Web3 is often we can take a solution from somewhere else and plug it into actually a different place. So maybe you can look at what people are doing in DeFi and be like, actually, that would really work in my game. And that solves a problem in my game. And I think that's actually one of the really enjoyable things about working in this industry.
Yves, in 12 months, how would you define success for EOS in the metaverse?
I'll address a little bit what Robbie was saying, because I think it touches both. What I find interesting about what's happening, kind of the trends and patterns, GameFi, Metaverse, NFTs, there's clearly a lot of capital being deployed, a lot of new protocols being built. So I think in the last 2 years, we saw roughly, 2 years ago, there's about 730 protocols that labeled GameFi, give or take, and now there's over 2,400. A lot of capital being deployed as well. The market is expecting that the revenue from publishers coming from NFTs in GameFi applications currently stands at around $3.6 billion in 2022 and expected to grow to $15.4 billion by 2027. So there's tons of capital being deployed. I think last year as well, 16% or so of all investments into blockchain came through the metaverse, GameFi, et cetera. So we're seeing that people are seeing that there's an opportunity there. And to extend to what Robbie was saying, one of the things that I find is most important, what I believe, to answer your question, in 12 months, it's the building blocks. So it's this idea that if, we're talking about interoperability, but a big part of that, and what Sebastien was also saying in terms of usability, in terms of UX, in terms of facilitation of onboarding, you need these plugins, you need SDKs, you need to facilitate the experience, not just for the end user, but for developers as well. And when we talk about kind of open source innovation, like you were mentioning, it's building these building blocks, focusing on that so that anybody then can leverage the thing. And what we're seeing over the next 12 months, I believe, is in a way what I call architectural blueprints, templates of, I've got this particular game, or I've got this particular application. Who else has been able to figure out how to leverage blockchain tech and what I could get out of Web3 with this particular application? Oh, look, there's 7 or 8 different templates out there. Here are the building blocks. Here's what I'm trying to achieve. And so then it facilitates the onboarding for Web2 as well. Because then instead of having to recreate the wheel every time, we're seeing more and more of these architectural blueprints, these templates, these standards coming about, where it becomes more and more and more plug and play, and then you start scaling and you start amplifying what we're seeing. So that's what I'd be excited about seeing in EOS the next 12 months, is a lot of those building blocks coming about, all open source so that everybody else can leverage, and it benefits the entire industry.
So what do you see as the best practices of Web 2 that should be implemented in Web3, giving you guys history, 15-year history within the space itself and the transitions? What are the good things that you're taking from Web 2 and try to bridge it to this new world?
Earlier I said one of the most important things is how we can continue to bring the fun people enjoying into the metaverse, like Web3 space. So just giving a functionality like, own the digital asset doesn't mean that it is something more fun for them, Why do I have to move my space from here? I'm living pretty well with this house, but why should I move? Giving this, that's not the whole thing. So as an actual live service provider in ourselves, that we are trying to be very careful that we're not ruining that. So for example, one of the quite important thing that we just already testing it, with the live service. So Coconut made our own wallet, but this wallet it's not like a wallet we've been seeing. This wallet is more likely, it's a dress room. So they don't feel this is wallet. This is more like a dress room. So when you pulling out your Web2 items, that is kind of coming into this wallet, but you don't feel like that you have it on your, have them in your vault or something. So it's like a dress room. You can change it, you can decorate it, things like that. And then if you want, oh, this looks pretty good, then let me send it to the metaverse world. That's exactly minting. So then it becomes an NFT. So this little thing is very important. And then today I have about an hour later, I have a keynote speech, and then I'm explaining that. But we really got to think about it. When iPhone came, the whole company, like for 5 years, every company in IT, they were looking for the UI UX designer, because that experience was totally new from the 2G phone to the iPhone. So every single company, they knew this is a game changer. So we all invested our time and money to find the good UI UX. So being Web3, it's also same thing. That's what I want to say.
I think that's a great way to wrap it up. Thank you so much for the panel, and thank you for everyone for assisting.
Thank you.
Thank you.